My name is Paulina Hal Hernandez, and I'm here joining y'all from Atlanta, Georgia, where I think it's like 60 degrees, so just for context. I just wanted to appreciate and also take the opportunity to be able to speak and share a little bit of just thoughts and reflections and things that have sort of bubbled up to the surface. For me, I feel like a room full of not only my friends and my comrades, but my peers. And I think it's also just important to name that I feel like a lot of the kind of political development that has happened in my own life has everything to do with people that are in this room right now. So when we're talking about being really, really nervous, it was also that moment, right? And so much of, I feel like what I was gonna speak to in terms of legacy are things that have already been beautifully said, both by Mandy Carter and by Julie Lawrence. So I just want to acknowledge that that's so much of, I feel like what is critical about spaces like this is about providing a little bit of sanctuary for us to be able to share some of our woundedness and be able to share some of our legacy and some of our stories that are actually gonna help us move beyond where we are today. So I'm very excited to be able to do that. I work for an organization called SONG, Southern Sony Ground. You might have heard of it. Our work is rooted in the 12 states in the Southeast, and specifically working with targeted states, with particularly in Virginia, in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in Alabama, and in Georgia, and helping to specifically build infrastructure in those states that is helping LGBT Southern and Two-Spirit folks build for what kind of destiny we want to have for our folks in the South, right? And to be able to sort of build not just the things that are about how do we get together and share our stories, but it's also about how do we fight to defend and protect our communities against the very active attacks that are happening in our communities every single day. So it needs to be said that while some of us, we experience oppression in a way as in, oh, I got caught up in a conversation and was made invisible, and some people are experiencing an entirely different kind of oppression that involves bodily harm, that involves death, that involves not being able to see their partners off into the next realm before they pass. We know that this is happening every day. So this is a reality, I feel like, of what we have to go back home to, a lot of us. And I think that the reason why spaces like this are really important and critical is because I feel like they give us the opportunity to take some stock of where we are, and they give us an opportunity to say what kind of cross-sharing, cross-learning we can do, but that the work is out of this room, and that this is only an incubation moment for what is yet to come. And that I think that part of what needs to be said at spaces like this is also that while I believe that spaces like this are also worth investing in, we also have to be able to take stock of what other investments we're making outside of this space. And so the conversation to me that goes directly to resourcing is also related to part of the intent of BOLD, which is to help leverage resources for our people. Right? And so the ways that we do that have to also be connected to the kind of strategies that we have to be willing to test out and be willing to walk out in our own communities. And one of the things that we're also trying at SONG and being a little bit more open about and much more explicit about is what kind of risks we're willing to take for our people. And I think that that's really one of the questions that is really for us to all of us to reflect in here, and why I think we've been sort of like inching towards that as we get closer and closer to the end. Is what happens here? What kind of risks are we willing to take institutionally? Not to build coalitions with each other, because that to me is even an initial step. But what kind of other issues we're willing to sort of go and put on the ground and test out new models for? What are some of the ways that we actually are saying, if we're so critical of the way that democracy works in the US, what democratic processes are we building in each other that look really, really differently? What does our facilitation look like? How do we intervene with drama? How do we intervene with people that are obstructing processes and taking away the rest of our ability to continue to work and have a willingness to work with each other? What are some of the things that are going to continue to undermine, I feel like, our sense of power, particularly of collective power? And I feel like that is something that is also at the table for BOLD, and I think it's something that has been whispered about in the hallways, has been talked about in individual hotel rooms, but has not actually taken stage and center stage. What are some of the real challenges about us working together, specifically as LGBT people of color? And I feel like part of the question that we're also putting to our folks in the South and with our people is that we have to continue to name the realities that we live in a white supremacist country. Otherwise, we do not need to have these kinds of spaces. Right? And so for me, what that means, and I feel like I also have to name that I'm also part of the First Nations Two-Spirit Collective. And and a lot of that work has taught, I feel like it has really clarified and helped to really crystallize how do we also encounter not just sort of how we name issues of sovereignty, but how do we actually also take part, an active role of helping to create sovereignty for all of our people, and all of us as folks of color? And how do we continue to also not just name white supremacy is a reality in the LGBT movement, that we know that plays out, but not in a way that only invisibilizes us, but it forces us to create legitimacy about who we are and about why our work together is legitimate. So part of the question that I have for us is how do we move beyond that? And not just to say we are legitimate to each other, but to be able to give voice and credit to each other. Another thing that I wanted to name is also that part of the work we have been continuing to build, and I feel like it's also an important reflection for me about the space, has been about how do we also continue to create things that we can bond around that are not just about centering whiteness. And that are not about centering like, how have you been hurt by white people? Let me tell you how I've been hurt by white people. Versus what are some of the shared imperatives that you and I have to organize together? Why is it important right now, in this particular moment in time, for immigrant communities, for refugee communities, for undocumented people, and people that are getting trafficked, abused, taken in, like we know what is happening with our folks. We know the level of hostility and violence that is happening in our communities. Why is it critical in a white supremacist country that has been built on slavery and genocide for us to work with the Black community? Why are we not talking about that anymore?
Yes.
Are we in a post-racial era where we're moving beyond that? And I feel like part of what, and that to me continues to be one of the things that comes back to the center, and that we continue to sort of talk about that it isn't just that we all look differently and we have diverse rooms and diverse coalitions, but that we're actually helping each other to work through what do we mean when we actually are not, when we say that there is a hierarchy of oppression. I want somebody to unpack that for me. And I want to be able to have some active consent about if this is some of the assumptions that we're walking into the room with each other before we even get here. So that was another. I also just wanted to just reflect on a conversation that I had with Carmen Vasquez last night. I'm going to call you out for a second. About what it also means to call something the first thing that you have ever done. That this is the first LGBT people of color conference nationally, which I think has been repeated over and over again, which is not true, right? We know. But I wanted to actually share something with you all, given to me by Carmen. From 1979, October 13th, 1979, Google it, that's Nancy's Carmen. Which was the first time that there was the National Third World Gay and Lesbian Conference. Literally, that was the title of the conference. Which was one of the first attempts to bring people of color together and the LGBT movement to talk about what was a priority for our folks. And I just wanted to name one of the things that the prophet, Audre Lorde, shared during her opening keynote for that conference. She said, I think, and I will read this because this is actually what she said, I think that we are all here because we are seeking a new kind of power, a force for change beyond the old forms which do not serve us. We are here because each of us believes in a future for ourselves and for those who come after us. We are redefining our power for a reason, and that reason is the future. And with that, I also wanted to say that part of what has been really interesting, and I know we kind of talk about it within the Song family, not as obvious to other people, but they're actually a lot of the kind of things that Mandy named, I think she was being very humble about that, is that they really shaped, they really kind of kicked our ass a little bit, a lot in the beginning. And what that means is also developing a sense of protocol as a people. What does it actually mean for us to come together from communities that also have that developed sense of protocol about how do we define and take a position and a stake about what is it, the things that we identify are right and wrong. That critique doesn't only live outside of our organization, but it lives in spaces like this, where we don't tell the truth. In spaces like this, when we are not naming the kind of legacy of work that has come before us, where we are not acknowledging the power of sex and desire in our movements. That this is the reason at the end of the day why a lot of us have come together, and to recognize who we are as a people has everything to do with our desire and our longing for each other as a community. And that we are creating a new kind of power by coming together. And that that has everything to do with our willingness to do so and to continue to walk out of this room to do that. And so for me, I would also come back to that question of protocol, of But what kind of protocols are we willing to make with each other? What kind of new covenants, as people who have been colonized, and our own protocols in the sense of right and wrong has been dismantled within the U.S., what are the new promises that we're making to each other? And how are we holding each other accountable around those promises? And that is what I want to walk out of the room with. I want to be able to say to people that I love and care about, I will have your back. I will tell you the truth. I will follow up with you when I say I'm going to follow up with you, and if not, I'm going to apologize, and I'm still going to follow up with you. And giving each other the sense that it isn't over till it's over. And people, I am indigenous, I'm Aztec, and Mayan, the Aztec calendar and the Mayan calendar are all saying it's a wrap in 2012. So I feel like we actually have a spiritual imperative to really get our shit together. Because I feel like one of the things that we also talk a lot about our song, and it's one of the things that we consistently have to bring to the table, and with the not just tone of like legacy and calling things out, but to also be able to say, everybody hears a call at some point as a movement people. And are we saying that we are people who belong to a sector of work, or are we saying that we're movement people? And we know that for each of us at the end of the day, I feel like I heard the call. And I knew at the time that there were going to be consequences for not responding to that call. And so after here, there is always a consequence for not responding to that call. And I feel like walking out of this room, and one of the things that I go back to and I take back with me to Georgia, to rural Alabama, where the only place where people get to see each other sometimes is the club and the bar. And they have to figure out how to build infrastructure outside of that. And we have the access to this. What is our problem? So I just want to say also thank you so much. I'm so